Today's topic will be intraday Gann trading. I'm going to show you how Gann actually did his trading to the minute, and you'll be able to find out how you can trade and know the highs and the lows every day to the exact minute and the exact time and the exact price. This is the multi-million-dollar secret you never learn in these other courses, and I'm going to give it to you for free today. It's going to be a very difficult lesson, and I doubt more than 5 out of 100 of you are going to pay close enough attention to and do the work that's required to actually do this. But I'm going to show you how Gann did it and how easily it is to do. Wouldn't you like to be able to know the exact low for the day before the day even started, and perhaps even the exact price? I'm going to show you how in this video. How about knowing where the major resistance is every day and what will happen to the prices when they hit these secret numbers? Would you be able to figure out this exact low exactly to the minute, weeks ahead of time, and know it was going to be a major trade? You see, Gann was a master astrologer. That's how you pinpoint all these trades. I'm going to show you in this video the key Gann secrets he really used that you don't even know existed. He said you would not figure out his methods because they were a combination of astrology and numerology. I'm going to show you what he meant by that. You don't need to read tunnel through the air and look for some arcane pattern and gobbledygook number system. I'm going to show you simple methods here, how to do it very scientifically on your intraday charts. You may wonder how I was able to figure it out. Well, I had to do what Gann did. I had to become an astrologer. When I first heard about Gann, it was the mid-1970s. We had no computer programs. We basically only had 4-banger handheld calculators. So I had to do it by hand the way all astrologers do. I had to get a table of houses. This particular one is for Geneva, Switzerland, but you'd get one for New York City or whatever stock exchange you're trading, and you'd have to look up minute by minute throughout the day where the rising sign is, the ascendant, the 10th house, which is straight up overhead, like when the sun is directly overhead at midday, and the various house positions of the 12 houses of the zodiac. And you would have to calculate these things by hand and watch throughout the day, minute by minute by minute by minute, when these things turned. And pretty soon you get to see the calculations that Gann was doing and what happened when the various planets moved through these houses. You've seen many of these Gann master charts with different sets up, but many of them have hourly figures. Like here's one that has 6 a.m. over here and 9 a.m. and then you got a noon here. And you ever wonder why you get these various hourly turns? Or here's another chart. And this one, he's got like the 0 degrees here and then 6 a.m. at like 6:30 here, and then like 12:30 at the top, and he's got all these angles and numbers on here. And then here's your classic Gann square of 9 set up both daily and hourly. The 1st of March 20th starts it, and then it goes up to June, which is summer, and then in the fall, and then you have winter. But he's also got hourly turns. Here's a 6 a.m. and it goes up to like noon. So he's got all these charts, and what exactly is he doing with these things? We're going to have to first look a little bit about the astronomy, how the Earth turns and how it's related to the planets. Here's a picture of the Earth, basically. These vertical lines here are your longitude lines. They're 15 degrees apart, which is 1 hour of travel. So if you're right in the middle here at Greenwich Mean Time, and New York is 5 hours west, there's 5 lines of 15 degrees, which makes it 75 degrees west longitude. And then over here, this is the ecliptic, which is the line of the sun. It's not exactly around the Earth. It comes at an angle of 23 degrees, which is tilted to the Earth. We can see some planets here. Here's Venus, here's Mercury, here's the Sun, here's the symbol for Scorpio, and here's Libra and whatnot. So the houses of the zodiac are only the star systems that are right around this line. If you look up in the sky and you see something over here, it's not in our zodiac. It's a star in some other constellation. Our 12 signs of the zodiac only follow this line. And you will find that these different houses have to do with angles about where you are. So if you were right here and you were looking at the sun, you could see it straight down. If you were located over here, the sun would kind of be at this angle. If you were up by the North Pole, you couldn't even see it because your line of sight would be cut off over here and you couldn't see it. And maybe you could see it when it was way over here. So depending on where you are on the Earth will make a big difference about where you're going to see these things. Now we can look at these things with our modern day astrological programs, and I highly recommend Solar Fire. I've used it for almost 30 years now. In the early 1990s I got mine, but there are several other ones you can buy. This one is relatively cheap. It's like $360, $380, something like that. It will show you what we call the diurnal motion of the Earth. That is that the Earth turns around in a circle in 24 hours. That's why we get day and light. And it goes 360 degrees in 24 hours, or 15 degrees every single hour. And there are certain positions on the Earth that are very important. One is called the ascendant. And this would be like you're standing on the beach and you see the sun pop up over the water. That is a direction we call the ascendant, where that sun would pop up right at sunrise. And then when you're directly overhead, we have something called the midheaven. Now this, you would think it would be directly overhead like this, but it's not. It depends on where you are on the Earth and the season of the year. This particular time in October, this could have been at the 11:30 or 12, and in late summer it might be at 2 o'clock, but it will still be at the position where it's overhead for you. So these are important turning points that you will find. Now the turning of the Earth creates what we call the diurnal, day and night, motions of the Earth. The Earth spins around 360 degrees in 24 hours. We know that. But it also moves 1 degree forward in its annual orbit around the sun. That's why it takes 360 years to make 1 year. Now there are 60 minutes in an hour. So in 24 hours, there are 1,440 minutes. So each degree of the 360 degrees of the daily turn would be about 4 minutes per degree. But since the Earth moves 1 degree forward to point to the same star from yesterday, we really only have a day that's 23 hours and 56 minutes. Here's an example on this day, October 29th, at 6:54 p.m. We can see the rising sign is 28 Taurus and 12 minutes. And yet if we go 1 day further to October 30th, we get the same rising sign, 28:11, 28:12, but now it's 6:50. So we can see from 6:54 to 6:50, we've lost 4 minutes of time. So this is one of the functions that also changes for the length of the day. Since you're going to move 4 minutes every day as the Earth moves in its orbit, your sun is going to rise or set about 4 minutes difference every single day throughout the year. And we know it late in the fall and in the winter we have the shortest day, and the summer is the longest day. What's very important is that there are times each day when the planets rise and set. Not just that the sun rises in the morning and goes overhead, but all the planets do. As the Earth is turning around, each planet comes up and rises, and they hit the midheaven, and then they set, and then they're extremely down opposite the midheaven is called the IC, the point lowest below us. And these turn out to be trigger points on Earth. Now here's a picture off my Solar Fire of a live horoscope, or an animated one, for December 31st when I'm recording this. And we can see all the planets. They're kind of clustered here. There's a lot of parts of the sky where there's no planets, and there's 3 or 4 here and 3 over here. And during the day, I'm going to move this minute by minute. It will give the appearance of looking like this as they move. I'll speed it up. So it looks like here's Mars rising, here's Neptune, here's the Sun just going down below the horizon, here's Mercury dropping below the horizon, Pluto's about to go to horizon, the Moon is approaching over here, the midheaven, and there's the Moon right overhead, and it will give you various times during the day. So it looks like during the day that the planets are going around and they're rising, they're hitting their peak, they're setting, and then they're down at the bottom. Now this isn't really what's happening. You see, the planets don't move. The Sun only moves 1 degree per day, so it's always going to be here at 10 degrees today and maybe 11 tomorrow. But the fact that it looks like it's going around is really that the Earth is turning while these planets and stars and things are fixed out in the sky. And as the Earth turns, it gives the appearance that they're showing up over different surface areas of the Earth. So remember that the planets aren't moving very much. The fastest moving planet is the Moon. That moves about 12 degrees a day. The Sun moves 1 degree a day. Mercury is almost 4. Venus, the goddess of beauty, is a Fibonacci 1.618 degrees per day. But other ones like Saturn take a whole month to move 1 degree. Jupiter moves 1 degree a week. So there's different speeds, but during the intraday trading that we're going to be doing, it's this movement around the wheel when they are rising and setting, when they're going to trigger off these big emotional responses in the market. To save us a lot of time in the hand calculating all these positions, many computer programs like Solar Fire will give you a printout. You can just push a button and get a printout of all these times. For instance, here's the Sun is conjunct the ascendant, or it's rising. So the sunrise in this day would be 7:29 a.m. and then later in the day it hits the midheaven. It's directly overhead. So the midday is 12:40 p.m. and the various other planets are in here. And besides the sun rising and what, you can get the positions for the setting and other positions. So these positions are what's going to trigger off a lot of activity. So remember, Gann's time and price equality, I've mentioned this a lot in my other videos, especially on the Gann astrology video. The markets turn when time and price are equal. Time, remember, is a buzzword for planetary longitude. A degree of longitude can also be converted into an equivalent price. So if something is 212 degrees longitude, you could add multiples of 360 to the current price level. Let's say on the S&P might be in the 3,800, so that would be equivalent to 3812. Also, a price can be converted downward into a degree. So if you had a price of 3812, you could subtract 360 and 360 and 360 until you get a number under 360, and that could be the equivalent of a degree. So when either a price or a degree are equal to each other, that's when we get big turns in the market. So time and price conversions apply to everything. The ascendant and the midheaven are locational directions, like sunrise and straight up overhead. But as such, we can pretend that they are just like planets located at those longitudes, because there are energies coming from outer space that as the Earth turns and the ascendant just pops up, that location in outer space with quasars and pulsars and everything else will zap us and we will feel it. So just like planets, we can convert their longitudes into price levels for stocks by adding 360 multiples. So for example, 212 degrees of the ascendant could be a theoretical price of 3812. and we will observe market turns when such support or resistance levels are hit, or when the degree of a planet or the ascendant or midheaven is translated into a number and the market is at that number. Then time and price are equal and the market must reverse. Now here's an example of a translation of a planet. This particular program, many of you who have bought my books on the astrology methods have this program. And we see on this date, August 16th, here's the various longitudes of the planet going across the top. And then we just have a little spreadsheet from 0 to 359 degrees is the first cycle. And then we translate to 360 for numbers above 360 degrees, and then above 720 and above 1080. And so this is just a translation scheme. In this particular program you can put in any price where you're trading 5,000 or 10,000 or 1,000, and this last row will be that particular area. So here with Jupiter at 8 degrees or 8.18, in the first row it's 8 degrees, but you could have a stock at 368 or 728 or 1088, maybe for gold or something, and another one. And at the current level, 4328 would be the position of Jupiter. And also the moon over here at 16 degrees, you see, translates into 4336. And here's all the other positions of the planets. So this 8 degrees would be 4328. And see, this was the example I showed you earlier. Here's 4328. It made it to 4327 3/4. It hit the major Jupiter number, and then the market just collapsed. There are other things involved, which we'll get to in a minute, but when you calculate these support and resistance numbers, that's what's going to happen every day. Now, the timing of these things is usually when the planets rise and hit the midheaven or set. In this case, Venus is straight up overhead. You see right here, 7 Leo 15 is the rising, the midheaven sign, and Venus is located at 712, which really 715 as it pops over, and that took place over here at 11:50 a.m. And that was our low price here. 11:15 a.m. is exactly when Venus hit the midheaven, triggering off the low of the day. Here's a case where the market gave a little sell signal, and if you read all my books, you know you get a sell signal when you go under the low of the high bar. So there's a sell signal there. It goes up and tests it, fails again, and then you rallied up here and tested the low of the high bar, and then at this very moment the market crashed at 9:45 a.m. precisely because the moon was rising at 9:45 a.m. So at these points, we will see these various turning points in the market. On this particular day, here's a summary of all of many of the planets. You won't get all of them because they'll be overnight or the next day, depending on their longitude. But here's a number of them just when they hit the ascendant, not the midheaven or others. But Saturn hit the ascendant on this minute, and then here's Neptune, and here's Jupiter, and here's the moon, and here's Uranus. So most of these are very close to turns during the day on a very simple technique. And of course you would have your trend lines on here, and after you have a measured move down in a trend line, or you're drifting down and you get a turning point and then they break a low, you would do your normal executions, and you would trade accordingly. Now here we show the Saturn, which was at 9:49. Okay, so we could see over here Saturn at 9:49. Here's one of my programs that I've written on that date, and we see over here, here's the location of the planets. So Saturn itself was at 322 degrees, and at 9:49 the ascendant was at 322 degrees. In other words, Saturn conjunct the ascendant. Now normally you could say, okay, well I can just calculate if it moves about 1 degree every 4 minutes, the next planet would be Neptune, which is about 30 degrees difference. So I could multiply 4 minutes times 30 degrees, and I could say, okay, in about 2 hours I should get my next turn. But we don't, because during the year it does change its speed. On this particular day, it was very fast. You see, the 350 degree was 1057, and 351 was 1059. So the Earth was turning so fast it was only going every 2 minutes, and the Neptune degree actually came up at 1103, only a little more than an hour and 10 minutes or so from that. And that's because when I did this on December 30th, we were very near the Earth's perihelion, which is January 4th. Remember, everything is in elliptical orbit, even the Earth. And when they're at the perihelion, they're rounding the turn very fast. And so at perihelion, you can get an ascendant every 2 minutes, let's say, whereas in the summer, it might almost be 5. But on average, throughout the year, it will run about 4 minutes. Now, on a day-to-day basis, we want to look if there's any major aspects between the planets, not just the Earth moving around, but when the two planets may come together. And here's one we see on our typical astrological calendar. Now note, everybody should have some kind of astrological calendar. Here's an Amazon ad for a typical Llewellyn's calendar. This was mid-year, so it was discounted. They're usually about 15 bucks. But you can get these astrological calendars, and this will be like 1 day on the calendar. And it will show you minute to minute throughout the day where these big planetary things are. So we note on this day, the moon is opposite Uranus, and that's a bad guy, so it's probably a low, and it's at 9:34 a.m. And then you got another bad guy here, moon squaring Saturn at 11:29. So we're going to be watching during the day for events at the 9:34 and also at 11:29. And here's our 9:34 event, and then it goes up. Now, usually when you have an event, you draw a horizontal line in the sand, because that event translates the longitude into a strong support or resistance. So even though it went up and came down, it never broke this key level. And that's the indication that that was a major low. Then you're going up, and then 11:29, 11:30 was going to be our next event. And at the top of that bar, I put a horizontal line. And that's going to be resistance. There's a little slippage, and it goes up, and it goes down, it goes through, it hits its head, and it's going to go down until we get the next moon aspect, which is the moon on the midheaven. So we're basically going to have a high here, and we're going to have a low down here. But this stuff is very precise. So even though we hit 11:30, why did we have all this mishmash in here where they're slopping around and not going down? Well, there was a reason for that too. That's because the market was waiting for Mars to set, which was exactly at the spike high at 11:44. That's when Mars was setting below the horizon at 11:44 on that day, and that triggered off the aspect here of the moon topping out, and then that was the final little spike, and then they went down for the rest of the day. So those are the things that you'll see. Here's a day where Mars longitude was plunging down into a Mars aspect, and Mars was setting at 9:55 a.m. So we knew the time to look for it, and the longitude of Mars was 8522, and we convert that to a price level, and we get 3775. So 3775 is right here. There was a little slippage for 1 minute. These are all 1 minute charts I'm showing you. They're all 1 minute. So you'll often get little tiny spikes that go off your number as they run the stops. But we'd be looking for 955 and looking for that price level. And if it respected it and turned up, we take along, and here's that level here at 9:55 a.m. is Mars setting. I mean at 9:55 a.m., which is right here. Now here's one a little more complex and brings up the idea of Gann using astrology and numerology with the numbers of things. So here we have a Sun versus 150 degrees of Saturn, which is a kind of a bearish aspect. Saturn's a bad guy. When he affects the Sun, it's usually a bad event. So there may be a low in the market at 12:08 p.m., but we can watch and see and have our trend lines to see if it's going up or down into that aspect. See, most of the day we have a lot of little moonbeams and stuff. The bigger events that you want to trade every week, of course, are when you have bigger planets. So the Sun and certainly Jupiter or Saturn or anything making aspects would be a much more important event. So here we have what actually happened. Now on the event time was going to be 12:08. So exactly at 12:08 here, we have the Sun 150 degrees of Saturn, and it's a plunging low. Now I might add here, I have a circle, and that's from many of my other books. I show you how you can take a radius vector from a high to a low, swing that around, and at the top of this is going to be resistance, and it will also help guide you to know if over here, if this is going to be a high or a low. In this case, obviously, it's going to be a plunging low, and it's going to tell us plenty of time that we're going to have a low in this area, and we know the minute of the low anyway, because it's going to be 12:08 p.m., and it's going to plunge there. Now on this day, the Sun was at 170 degrees. So usually we want to translate both guys, the Sun and Saturn. So first the Sun is 170, that translates into 4130. So here's 4130. So this is the Sun's longitude, which is going to be resistance. Went a little above, failed under it. Later in the day it came back and it's hit its head, and we usually buy and sell against these resistance lines. Now down here is a little bit different. This is where we're using the angle. So the angle is where the numerology comes in. Here's the Sun at 170 basically, and here's the Saturn at 319, and the difference between the two, it's not a longitude, but it's the difference between two planets, is 150. But we can use that numerological equivalent as a price, and so the price is 4110. So we go back here, and our price target is going to be 4110. And we see 4107 was the spike low, 4110 is just a touch higher than that. So we're looking for a low near 4110 at exactly 12:08 p.m. and then when it turns up from that, we go long again, waiting on that. I showed you a little circle there, by the way. This is my new book, Day Trading for 50 Years, which does a lot with circles and the octave systems. And you can get that book on my website. Down here, you click on this. If you want my big astrological courses, they're up here on my website. Here's a page from the Day Trading book showing you how you can convert any little impulse wave into its vertical and horizontal components, and these will be your maximum up and down. So this vertical bar here is the maximum the market will ever rally to, which it went right here, but we can also convert it to a circular arc. So if we put a circular arc through this guy, the resistance is right here and the arc goes down to a low. We can take the time unit here as a radius from that high over to here, then it goes up again. We can detach this and move it around, so after this high is made here, this goes to a low. Anyway, in this book it shows hundreds of pages of all kinds of very sophisticated stuff down to the minute that you can use without any astrology, whatsoever. Now we're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of how you make a lot of money. Let's take a low down here. Now at this low, the price was 39.1850. We can convert the price into a longitude equivalent. That's 318.50. And the ascendant at the moment of the low was 183.64. And we can also move that around. So as we go through our, the ascendant goes from 0 to 360 all day long as the Earth turns around. So if we were at 183 here, as the day goes on, it will eventually get to our equivalent price of 318. And at this point right here, when the ascendant is 318, the time, which is the ascendant, is now equal to the price. and we must get a reversal. So it's been going down exactly to this minute, and then it goes up. We can also advance this ascendant from the 183. Maybe we'll try 180 degrees more to 363, but we only go to 360, so reduce that. So when the ascendant gets back to 364, we get another turn, very precise, exactly to the minute. We can do this off Solar Fire. You can get a listing of your ascendants where these numbers come up, and that can do it. I have my own programs that I write that calculate these things for me. Using that same origin we just showed, we can go 90 degrees more, and there's a nice high. We can then go 180 degrees more, and that's a nice plunging turn right there. Here's a very big one I showed you before. The major high was 42.95.50. Okay, so we can actually add up, accumulate the ascendants of 360, 360, 360 every day for 12 to 15 days, let's say, until it accumulates to 42.95. And my own programs I have, and by the way, don't send me 100 emails asking to get these programs. I do not sell them. I give them away to my seminar students or to my personal private lesson students, only when I show you, how they work and where you are and what the bugs could be in them. And I'm not a professional programmer. I'm an armchair programmer who's been doing it for 30 years, and I'm good at it, but I'm not a professional programmer. So there may be a bug here or there in it, but that's why I don't sell them to you. I give them to you when you take my bigger courses. But anyway, here's a case where I have a cumulative distance of the distance moved. And so the 42.95.50, 42.96 comes out at 1341 on August 30th. And here we have it down here, August 30th, 1341, exactly to the minute from 2 weeks earlier from this major high over here. So this is where we can get some very big turns. If we take our major highs and lows and then accumulate them all the way through, then we're going to get the big turns that can last a day or three or more. Here's a very simple but powerful technique again, is that we find a major low. In this case, it was the 27th of December at 10:03 a.m. The ascendant was 323. So in this case, we're not going to wait until the ascendant again gets to 323. It will hit 323 every day, and they'll be off like, that's why you get anniversary dates, so to speak, every day at 9:30 every day or 10:30 every day. But they'll be off by 4 minutes, and over a weekend they'll be off by like 15 minutes because they move every day. But what you really want to do is take the distance, not the 360 returning multiples every day, but the distance of that exact low. So here we move the cumulative distance to 323, and it comes out at 8:04 exactly, and then that's your high right there. So here's our thing. We started at 10:03. Here's the cumulative distance, and it comes out to 323, and it was 323 here. So when we reached the 323 here, it was at 8:03, 8:04 a.m., and we had the perfect turn. You might note also, although it's not that relevant here, but you often see this, that similar events will often occur. Here we had a sharp down and then a big spike up. So even though we had a high, we were a little delayed here. We had the same big spike up and then a longer correction. Now there are different speeds, different angles, but often remember, as you go through these translation of the longitudes, usually the same events will take place at the same degrees. So if you see a big vertical spike here, you're probably going to come up with some kind of big vertical spike here, and following that you're going to get a longer term decline. So you want to keep watch of those things. Now here's a case too. Now see, if you were just doing this, you would say, okay, well here's a nice thing, 323. I can take my little cycle finder tool and I can make a cycle, and I can go from there to there and just go out that distance. But no, that doesn't work, you see, because the ascendants are always turning. So here's a case where the ascendant was only 42. So the cycle length is only 42. And yet you go to the low to the exact high. You're not going to get the 323 this time. You're going to get the exact ascendant of whatever it was. And so here the cumulative distance was 42, and that's going to come out at 1558, and that's the 1558, right to the minute. It gets a little more complicated here. We can do some other things. We can have the ascendant of 42. We can take the price of the low and turn that into a degree, which is 188, and wait for the ascendant to move on from 42 to 188, and that's another little high. And that goes down over there. Now here's a case where we see a little slippage. Here's two tops I'm going to square out. I'm going to square out the high, and then I'm going to square out the low. Now the low is a lower price one, so remember when we move these ascendants 3,500, it's going to come out earlier than the top, which is coming out at 3,600. So often these will be transposed. So the first one will be at the 1010. Now my programs here, I have a program that I just punch in the price 3618, and that squares out down here at 1102 on the 21st. And then the next one I have is 3580, and that comes out at 8:30 a.m. on the 21st. And so and here's that original picture here. So this first bottom one squares out first at 8:30 a.m. The second one will square out here. Now the second one, note, we're only off by 3 minutes here. This one we're off a little more, but oftentimes it's 8:30 in the morning. The ARBs will manipulate and hold them because they have programs or they're waiting on news. So you have to be a little cautious about the things overnight and just before the opening, before they execute. But knowing that from a major low and another giant leg up, we're probably going to have some kind of major low and a giant leg up. And then here's a major turn too, with big turns on either side. So when this guy comes out, we've been going down, down, down. We're going to, give or take a couple of minutes in here, we're looking for something very big that's going to take place. Here's a little more complicated one. Here's one where the ascendant itself was 228. We moved it to 28, and it was this little spike high right here, and I kind of put a horizontal in there that stopped it. And then the price equivalent, 3502, was the price of 262. That came out for a secondary top here, and this is why we have kind of a broadenary top. And then it goes down, and yet there was one more big spike the next day. Remember the 360 return? The 228 will come back the same hour the next day, pretty close, at 360. And so we had one last final spike up, and this time, since it was a 360 multiple of it, it was our low price, 3502, plus the original ascendant, 228, which gives us a price of 3730. And here's 3720, 3740, here's 3730, right on our anniversary date the next morning, and then we get the major break. I mentioned before that on average the ascendant moves about 1 degree every 4 minutes. So in the old days, before I had a lot of astrological computer stuff, I did a lot of things by hand, particularly using a 4-minute chart, because each par then would be 1 degree of the ascendant on average. And then you could use a little cycle finder tool like this and have 15 degrees and 30 degrees and 45 degrees and 60. And often many of these would point out on a very quick and broad method where some of these big turns would turn out. But as we saw earlier, that sometimes this will only be 2 minutes, sometimes a little more. It will be 4 on average, but it is a technique you could use. Here's the precise way of squaring them out. Here was the top of 3733. That's a big number that won't square out for about 12 days, but we could take 1/8 of it, 466, and we can move the ascendant 466, and that gives us exactly our low. And then we could take 1/2 of that, which is 1866. So from this high, 1/2 of it comes out right here at 1404. So here's the 1/2 square out, and it comes out at 1404. And Often you'll note that when you get a square out, like here's 1/8 of the 3690, that squares out exactly here, you'll often see the same fractal again. Just straight up measured move, straight up measured move, and then a big elong decline. So you always want to watch for same fractals appearing. And so here's the 1/8 just showing that when the time it comes out. The other thing to keep in mind is, remember, each aspect of any kind or placement creates support and resistance. So here we had the moon hitting the ascendant and it broke. This is going to be a pivot for us. If it comes up here and it blows through it, this is now going to be support. We go long above it. Comes down here, can't really hold it, so we go short under it. We still go short under it. It's coming down, coming down. Then we're going to run into a Mercury at the midheaven. Now we have our angles on, we can put on too, and so there was an angle hitting it here, and this was the moment Mercury at the midheaven. So that's translated into resistance, and we go down. We try and base when the sun hits the midheaven, Venus hits the midheaven, so this is going to be a support level for a while. We go up. We can't get through our Mercury midheaven. We try. We go on down. We try and hold the sun and Venus for 10 minutes or so. Can't do it. Hits its head on it. Hits its head on it. Here's a moon at the midheaven. The moon was resistance at the ascendant. We got moon now at the midheaven as resistance. So each of these events will give you support and resistance. Some will be major, some will be minor, but at least for 2 or 3 minutes you'll be able to trade against them and put a stop. And just in case they really blow through or they really go down against you, it's a good place to set up a trade. We can also look at various trend lines intra-hour. Because we know if it goes about 15 degrees per hour, we can take a 1-minute chart and go over 1 hour from like 4:09 to 5:09, and it's going to be up 15 degrees. So 38.45 plus 15 is 38.60. So we can just put a dot here at 38.60 and draw a trend line, and this will be an ascendant trend line. And along the way it breaks it, comes down, hits its head on it, also squares out, goes on down, and then when it squares out this other high over here, you get a little bit of a low. So you can actually put on these intraday trend lines that way. Now here's a very nice technique you can use every day almost, and this is when the price equivalent equals the ascendant. So we go up here and there's a high, and we find out what that price is. The price was 38.22, so the equivalent degree of that price is 222. Now at this particular point it was 324 was the ascendant, but we know the price was 222. So as the day goes on, it goes past 324, past 360 to 1, 2, 3, 4, up and around, and it finally gets to 222 at the exact moment of the low. So at this point the time is equal to the price. So you have a high and you go down to the low exactly to the minute. And here it is when the ascendant itself exactly hit our 222 price equivalency. Now, let's go back to Gann's chart and take a look here. What is he doing? He's got, well, we do see the sunrise here, and he's got his 15 degrees for the ascendants and the midheavens and this. But what is he doing? Well, it's pretty obvious. He's following the instructions in the Bible. You all know that, right? You read the Bible every day. If you read the Bible every day, you know what he's doing. God said, let there be lights to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, days, and years. This is the whole basis of the use of astrology. The greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And we are to divide the light from the darkness. So these are the instructions for us. So how do we divide the light from the darkness? We look at sunrise and sunset. Here's a little chart off of Google, but you can get it on your iPhone for any city. Just look up the weather pattern. They'll give you sunrise, sunset. If you have solar fire, you can do it. Whenever the sun hits the ascendant, you're basically at sunrise. On this date in November, the days are getting shorter. Sunrise was 6:34. Sunset was 4:44. The duration of the day is 10 hours and 9 minutes, or 10:10 really. So I did 10:09 here. 10 hours times 60 minutes plus 9. So the duration of the day is about 609 minutes. And here's a little schematic of it. The rise from the sunrise. Directly overhead is the midheaven here. And note that that's 11:39. And we've been using the midheaven here. Here's 11:40 on the solar fire where the sun is overhead. So that's basically this little schematic here. So we're going to take our duration of the day as 609 minutes. So what do? We have a line here for sunrise. We have a line for sunset. The duration is 609. We find out 1/4 of our day is right here. 1/2 of our day is right here. 2/3 of our day is right here. 3/4 is right here. And then there's sunset. So we divide our day, our light from the darkness, based on sunrise and sunset. So you can take this free program off my website, the Master Calculator. If you have it in minutes here, I click this on minutes, and I started at sunrise. And so I put the 609 minutes of the day in there, and 1/4 of that is 152. So that would occur at 9:06 a.m., which is what I put right here, 9:06 a.m. So you could precisely do it that way. I do it a little more sloppily in that once I have my sunrise and my sunset, I use a little cycle finder tool and divide it into quarters first. So I have 4 bars, 1/4, 2, 3, and the 4th one is here. And then I divide it into thirds. So here's 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3. And then during the day, we can just look. When we get to these vertical bars, we expect some kind of big turn. This may be off a touch. It could have been this low. Remember, these cycle finder bars are only as good as how good you are at placing them. And also there's a little change in speed, so you may want to check it minute by minute to be more precise. The other thing I do here is I use my circular arcs. When I have a low to a high, it's the same arc here as it is right to here. This gives me a sense of where the culminations are. So normally you'd expect a low, but since it broke out and it was going up, we now know at this point where it's culminating is going to be a high. So it becomes a high, and it's right at our 3/4 point, and it's going down, so we get a big cell signal, and then it goes on down into sunset. Now let's see what happens if we just follow through on this. I just left my cycle bars on here through the day. Here's that last day we just looked at. Then here's overnight. Here's the red one, nice low. Green one is a high. Red one's a low. Here's a nice high. Here's another low. Here's another low. Here's another high. Here's another low, and the next morning on inflation news, right to the minute, big blast off. And now we see it's also a fallback pattern, that this leg up here is this leg up here. And if it's going to be a fallback pattern, we can look at it and say, okay, it falls back past the green, the first low is past the red, and the final low is down closer to the second green. So we're going to expect it going down with the first low past the red, and then the next big low is where the green is. And so this is what happens. First little low is down here, where the red is. And then the big final low is going to be here. And in this case, we had a big waterfall decline right on that area. And we put our arc on it. And the center of my circle here is the Mars at the midheaven. And it describes the event. And the reason I got that is because this event right here was Mars at the IC. Directly under the MC is the IC. So when Mars was directly at the bottom of the chart, we had right here, Mars was making the low, and it was a bad day because there was a sun aspect at 23 degrees to 23 Mars. So there was an aspect during that day making Mars the most important planet. So it plunges into the circular arc, it bounces back to translate to the exact same longitude it was right here. And the decline is going to be over right there. Now you can also use your square root of 9. If your day was 609 minutes long, you could check it out at 514, 427. You could use these as the minutes for breakpoints in the day, and that would be your square root of 9. People who are taking my seminars have a program like this This is a live time wheel where you can have all the planets marching around the square of 9, but in this case I just have the ascendant checked off, and in this case it was at 352, which was straight down on the chart on the square of 9 at 11:45 a.m. And here we go into the plunging low. This one shows 11:41, so the 11:45 minute was the beginning of this big upsurge. But we can see there is an effect here of trading the market minute to minute off the square of 09. So that's basically all I'm going to show you today on the detailed stuff. There is much, much more to it, and those who have taken my seminars know that there is a method to show the exact sequences of the highs and the lows, prices, and the timing of each high and low in time. You would go to my big all-day seminar and look at the intraday trading and apply this ascendant stuff to it. And there's also some hints in my Secret Science book and my Astro volume. So there is a lot more once you master these other things. And now for a small bonus, I'm going to talk about the law of vibration, because most people don't really know what it is. Gann always talked about it, the periodic rise and fall of stock prices related to the chart of the element, and but it's much more occult than this. It goes back all the way to Hermes Trismegistus. We see that the degree of the price translations is a type of vibration. But Gann wrote this book, The Magic Word, and he really thought a lot about it. The 7 letters is the name of God, Jehovah, or Jesus. He considered Jesus and Jehovah the same. And all of Gann's stuff has all these biblical quotes in it. And he says in this book you should chant daily and intraday the name of God, Jehovah, or chant Jesus all day long. When he was trading, he was doing this chanting. But he did this because of the law of vibration. He was raising his body to the highest vibration in the universe, which is God's name. So let's look at the law of vibration. Basically, all philosophies come down to the basic religion. One day, God's consciousness awoke. I am. Or like Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Or Shakespeare made a joke out of it when he had Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. Am I really God or am I not really God? To be or not to be is the I am, the name of God, which God told Moses. I am, that's the name. God's consciousness was awake. Everything that was made is created within the mind of God. In other words, we are figments of God's imagination, like the Matrix movie. Being made of such thought form consciousness, man has free will to be co-creator with God's consciousness. The various thought forms we make have different vibrations. The lowest are the material manifestations as opposed to emotional ones like love, which is God, and the highest vibration. That's why he used God's name. Most of us in the stock market vibrate to the lower ones, sex, booze, and chocolate. The lower chakras, as well as money and motivation. Remember, going after money is not bad. It is the love of money which is the root of all evil, not money itself. So this is entirely allowed within man's free will. Man's perpetual thinking in certain patterns stratify his individual consciousness. And that's what creates individuality. And in general, these states of consciousness are represented by the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples of Christ. So we evolve our consciousness through the figures of the people in the Bible, in all those consciousness forms, until we get to, from our primitive state through all 12 of these other states of the 12 disciples, until we finally reach the Christ consciousness. I and my Father are one. Then we realize we are not separate entities, but are part of the same living God. In other words, we recognize our neighbor as ourself. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do unto me, because you see you are the same. This accounts for all the differentiation among men who have developed along lines of consciousness patterns over many lifetimes. Yes, the Bible is reincarnational. is based on a creation period of 6 days, which is 6,000 years. While everything was created once and only once, and all the past, present, future exists simultaneously, man must nevertheless evolve his individual consciousness through this creation period by walking the fires of hell, which is here on earth. And if you've ever had a loved one die or get cancer or get killed or murdered, you know what the fires of hell are. And then you are purified enough to rejoin with the Godhead. Peter here says, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. So the 6 days of creation is 6,000 years of reincarnations for each individual person. This is why Adam died on the very day he ate the apple. Even though we're told in the same paragraph he lived 930 years. That was the same day to God. So here's the most important lesson in life. I don't care if you learn the other stuff about the market. You should know this. Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones used to saying, you can't get what you want, you get what you need. That's not true at all. They're both wrong. It's a reflective principle, as above, so below. The universal consciousness or Christ consciousness is reflective and self-regulating. You always get what you are. That's the law of attraction. This is why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Drug addicts always get worse. Thieves are always thieves after prison. Your consciousness vibrates to what you are and attracts the same vibration. This is why Gann chanted daily, especially before trading. If you're afraid to lose your money and worry about getting stopped out all the time, you will lose your money, as your consciousness is that of a loser. You got to focus on success and visualize it before you make the trade. There's something known as the consciousness of poverty. If you go to a fine restaurant and you're afraid to order anything until you look at the price, you are living in the consciousness of poverty. If before you buy a nice suit of clothes at a store, the first thing you do, if you look at the price label, you have a consciousness of poverty. If you're one of those people who make snide remarks on my YouTube saying that I should be giving my books away for free and they're far too expensive, you're living in a consciousness of poverty. And you will not make money and be a success as long as that happens. You can read these quotes in Matthew here talking about the talents, where the guy left his country and gave to his servants certain amounts of money, and they invested it, and the ones who made more money, he gave them even more, and he rewarded those. But the one who didn't, who just buried his money or talent in the ground, he said, thou wicked and slothful servant, and then take therefore the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. This is the law of like begets like. You're reflected back what you are. So being successful starts with self-identification as being successful. This applies to everything in life. Like begets like, birds of a feather flock together. What are you? Why do you think Trump was elected? He had a very positive, powerful mind. He had no doubt whatsoever in his mind he was going to be the president. Like begets like, and the universe reflects that back to you. In summary, when you read Gann's books, you're going to get all these Bible quotes. Every one of these Bible quotes has a secret meaning about a level of consciousness. If you are a winner, the universe will send you winning trades. Thinking pure thoughts, chanting can help. As you evolve, you listen to classical music, literature, not the daily newspapers that pollute your mind with endless low-level hatred. Now, the law of God is basically, whatsoever you ask of the Father believing, it shall be given to you according to your belief. Or, knowing whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same he shall receive. Whatsoever you will ask of God, God will give it to you. Okay, whatsoever ye shall ask the Father in my name, it will give it to you. Okay, most people think these prayers, asking the Father, is what you do in church. This is not right at all. Okay, God doesn't listen to verbal things. God only responds to thought patterns and emotional patterns. So everything is the consciousness of God. So every thought that goes through your mind is a prayer, and it will be answered according to your belief in it, who you are. This is why God allows bad things to happen to good people. It's really you, God, that are thinking those bad things, like, I might get cancer. I hope I don't get robbed or shot. I'm afraid this plane could crash. I might lose my money. I'll probably get stopped out on this trade. You never realize how many times a day you have destructive thoughts and beliefs that over the years of thinking perpetually these things every day, they will ultimately manifest. They are a prayer to God, and He answers all prayers. You must clear your mind before you make a trade. You must block out negativity, and you must think positive when you go into a trading atmosphere. For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So that's basically it for this time period. I thank you all for taking all this time to listen to this, and I hope it helps you out with your life and trading.